Hey everybody, this is Greg for Umava, and we have been working on a Pro Tools demo song, just using some of the basic instruments in Pro Tools. That is in the mix stage. I have another song in the mix stage, so things are pretty busy at the moment. What I thought we would do, though, is to jump into some basics of synthesis. There are a lot of different software instruments on the market that you can work with, and they all seem to have a little different angle, in a little different feature set, so everybody's trying to add a unique concept of some sort to their instrument. And if you're just starting out working with software instruments and you open up this thing and there are just knobs everywhere, it can be intimidating and difficult to understand what's really happening with the instrument. And so what I thought we would do today is look at an instrument that has some of the really standard classic synthesizer features on it. Go through those. These are things that you will see basically on any software instrument that you work with. And I have loaded into Pro Tools for us the Mini Mojo, which is a free download from the Native Instruments user content section of their website, if you have Native Instruments Reactor, which I happen to have. So the Mini Mojo is loaded up here, and you can see, first of all, that the different knobs on it are divided up into sections. There's a section labeled controllers. Here we have our oscillator bank. There's a mixer. This is a modifying section, and then the output section. We're just going to work through each of these in turn. The controller section on this instrument is kind of a miscellaneous category. There's a master tuning section where you can control the pitch of the whole instrument. There's a glide knob where you can control the portamento, as it's usually referred to, or when you move from one key to the next on the keyboard, if you want it to slide in between the notes. Particularly, a lot of times you do that with a lead instrument. There's a switch down here that turns that function on and off. And then we have a modulation mix knob, and we'll get into modulation a little bit later when we get over to the modifier section. What we need to jump into straight away, though, is the oscillator bank. What's an oscillator? You need to think of these as your sound sources. This is where sounds come from, okay? And I like to think of, when I'm explaining this to people, in the summer, when it's hot, you may have an oscillating fan in your room. What's that oscillating fan do? It moves up and back, okay? It repeats in a regular pattern. And that's essentially what these oscillators do. They emit a sound that generates a regular sound wave according to some pattern. Over here, where it says waveform, we can select what pattern of sound we're going to hear. And then over here in the mixer, for each of the oscillators, there's 3 oscillators on this instrument, 1, 2, 3. There's also a knob to mix together the level of sound coming from each oscillator. So I'm just going to turn down 2 and 3 so we can just work with 1 oscillator at the moment. And if I press key now, you hear a sine wave, triangle wave, sawtooth wave, and square wave. Then there's a couple other waveforms that are more complex. And you may see different variations on those on different instruments. But typically you're going to see these different wave patterns here: sine, triangle, sawtooth, and square. Okay. The other thing that we have over here is it says range. This is going to control the octave at which the oscillator is playing. So I can change the pitch of the oscillator by a full octave. Okay. And that's useful when you start combining sounds together. So we're going to bring up the volume of oscillator 2 a little bit, and maybe Let's do square and triangle. Okay, so you get an idea of how that works to blend together different sound types. You can adjust the volume of them over here in the mixer. You can adjust the pitch of them over here. It's important to note on this instrument that I have to turn on and off the functions that I actually want to hear. I'm going to turn down oscillator 2 again so that we're not hearing that. And we'll go back to working with just oscillator 1 for a minute. The mixer section here has another section to it besides the volume controls. It allows you to add distortion to the sound coming out of the oscillator or noise. And again, I have to turn it on. Okay, so you can fatten up the sound by adding some distortion. And then there's noise as well. And on oscillator 1, it looks like here if we can blend the level of noise and distortion coming in, okay, into our sound. The next important section is the mod section, okay? And there's two different sections to this. This says loudness contour. Usually you're going to see it labeled as amp envelope or simply amp. So this relates to how the volume of the instrument changes over time. If I change the attack to a slower attack rate, the instrument's going to start slower and then come up to volume. If I change the sustain and decay level, you can see that you can change how long a note holds on, and how quickly it begins. That's kind of the easy part. This would be a mod section related to the filter, okay? And you can see up here in little letters, filter. This is our filter section. And we can add a control envelope to how this sound changes over time that has to do with a particular effect. And what we have here is kind of an EQ section. If you think of your home stereo, and on your home stereo you have maybe a high and a mid and a low boost or cut, you have or maybe you have a treble and bass control that affects the sound in a way, and that's exactly what we're going to do to the sound here on our Mini Mojo. We have a filter that we can change. We can change the frequency. So if I just, okay, that's cutting a lot of the bite out of the sound. Okay, and then there's an emphasis. A lot of times you're going to see this labeled resonance. Between these two things, it gives you a lot of control over the sound. And again, we have an attack time, a decay time, and a sustain level. But this doesn't relate to how quickly the note comes on or how long it holds on. This relates to the cutoff frequency and resonance effect. So if I slow down the attack, you can hear, okay, we're first hearing the bite of the instrument, and then it's being taken off. You can make that, okay. Now that I've toned down the instrument a little bit with the cutoff frequency, you can hear that as time progresses, there's more and more bite to the instrument. Decay, sustain. that allows you to change the instrument over time. In the output section here on the Mini Mojo, we have a master volume control. We have a A440 note. This is a master tuning note. If I turn it on, it just gives you a master tuning note. That's helpful if you have adjusted the master pitch and you need to try to restore the instrument to where it started. Also, this has an effects section. If I scroll down, there's some different effects that are loaded here. There's a phaser, a flanger, and a reverb delay unit. And the way this works is I have to turn on that I want signal to go down here to these effects units. And then I also have to tell, using this effects return knob, I have to tell the Mini Mojo that I want those sounds to come back into the master output. So let's turn up the delay a little bit, turn up the reverb. So you can see the difference that makes. If you add all these different things together, play around with the oscillators, play around with the octaves of the oscillators, the mix of the different sounds, add some distortion or noise to it, add a filter effect, and then play around with delay or some other funky effect on it, you can create some very dynamic, very interesting sounds with this instrument. And this is kind of just basics of synthesis. You are going to see on most instruments some section labeled OSC. This stands for oscillator. You're going to see a mixer section, and you're going to see a filter section. And probably some types of effects. And if they're not there, you may end up adding effects elsewhere in ProTools to accomplish shaping the sound the way that you want it to.